in Beirut, Lebanon, the homeland of my mother's family. I'm looking out at the Mediterranean Sea. The first time I've ever seen it, folks, was on this trip. I've just gotten finished with a week-long trip to Iran, and part of my trip was to come to Lebanon and to meet with some clerics here, Christian and Muslim clerics, about the first international conference dedicated to Christian and Islamic unity. And to say that it's been a wonderful trip is an understatement. I've told you before about how wonderful the Iranian people are. The Lebanese people are just as wonderful, but not nearly as wonderful as the company that I have had here in just the last few days. One of our guests today, you will immediately recognize his voice because I have done many programs with him in the past, and it is the one and only irreplaceable Nasheed Abdul Khalik from Ascertain the Truth, one of my closest friends, more like a big brother to me than anything else. And folks, for the first time in history, we are joined by the one and only irreplaceable Saba, who you have come to know on the website from her brilliant commentary, various articles that she has posted. She actually lost her mind temporarily and decided to come all the way down here to Lebanon as well, just to meet yours truly. I don't understand it, why people would go out of their way to do such a thing, but she did it nonetheless. So we've had a wonderful 4 days together. Today is the last day that we're here. We're all headed back to our respective homes and families, and so here we are, folks. So anyway, Nasheed, say hello to all the world out there, the Ugly Truth students listening to this program.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I feel blessed, I feel honored to finally meet a person I call the bravest man I know. In person, finally, Mighty Mark. And when I knew he was coming to Lebanon, since there was no way I was going to let him come here without me seeing him. So Mark is a wonderful magnet, and he has drawn me. My wife is also here with us as well. Akanki is her name. And it's just a real thrill, joy, and a pleasure to meet Mark in person. And to be here in Lebanon, seeing a very beautiful view of the Mediterranean. I mean, I wish we can share this view with the listening audience, but I am really honored to be here with my great close friend, someone that I call my brother, my leader. What else should I say about it? But I really am happy to be here.
And Saba.
I concur with everything Nasheed had said, and really, for me, the honor, the pleasure is mine, and I am the one honored actually to be with you.
Well,
both of you.
The honor goes all the way around for all of us. It's been like a big family reunion, folks. I've known Nasheed for years. I've known Saba for months, but nevertheless, I feel like I've known everybody here at least all my life, and it's just been a wonderful trip, folks. But as much as I have enjoyed being here with all these good people, I am looking forward to coming home and being with my flesh and blood, and because that's what this is all about. Why we're doing this is the big Gentile family, the big Gentile reunion, and we have to bring this about, and that's the discussion that we're going to be having today, folks. Now, before we get into this, I want to set everybody up for an understanding of the discussion that we're going to have. As those of you who follow the website and the work that we do on it understand that a major component, if not the major component, that has been part of our menu now for over 10 years is to bring about this reconciliation between Christianity and Islam. Not to create some amalgamation between the two, because I think that the Muslims should be allowed to remain Muslim and the Christians should be allowed to remain Christian. No different than the children in my family. You know, they all have traits among them that make them very common, but they're very distinct people, and I would hate to have 10 children who were all exactly the same. And I think that this is the way God sees it. He has created all of us differently, and I think that he celebrates and revels in our differences. And so in that regard, I would hate to see Muslims surrender an ounce of their identity in favor of something that was Christian, and vice versa, because I think that we have a relationship here that is very complementary. Nevertheless, we have to understand that just as any family that has been torn apart by strife from some outsider who has deliberately come in and torn asunder this family, we have to mend these ties, because literally, folks, this is not just an academic exercise we're talking about here. We're talking about the deaths of millions, if not billions of people, because the ones who are responsible for creating this quote-unquote clash of civilizations, they don't just have small designs, that they want their own land, and it's just this little sliver of land along the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea. They want the whole world, and they understand that the way to do this is to get these two great civilizations of people at each other's throats. So I want to set up today's discussion first with a little piece of history that's very important for people to understand and remember. We've talked about the USS Liberty many times on this program, and I've used this as a very good example, a microcosm of the tragedy that we're facing right now. Those who don't know what happened on June the 8th, 1967, I'll give you a brief rundown. The USS Liberty was sitting just a few miles away from here, as a matter of fact. It was a U.S. spy ship, and the Israelis attacked it in 1967 for 2 hours, almost 2 hours, tried to sink the ship because what they wanted to do was to blame it on Egypt in order to create a political situation where the Russians would be driven out of the Middle East. Now, the eyewitness accounts of what happened with the Liberty is that on the morning of June the 8th, right around, I think around 5 a.m., the Israelis started low, slow surveillance flights above the Liberty. Very, very low, very, very slow. In fact, so low and so slow that the survivors of the Liberty said that the deck would rattle. The deck of the ship would rattle because the planes were so low. 8 hours of surveillance flights had taken place that morning, so that when the Israelis made their attack, they knew exactly what to attack to render the ship helpless within seconds of the attack, which is exactly what happened. Excuse me. About 30 seconds into the attack, the Liberty was completely dead in the water. The Israelis, when they were surveying the ship, they were taking pictures of all the antennas and the radar dishes and everything else, everything that could be used for communication. And they knew exactly what to attack. They took the pictures, they took them back to headquarters, and they studied those pictures for hours so that they could tell their pilots where to attack so that the Liberty would be unable to communicate and get a call for help out. And so, this is exactly what has been done by our common enemy with regards to Christianity and with regards to Islam. They have spent, in the case of Christianity, 2,000 years studying our religion, studying our mindset, studying our psychology, and knowing exactly how to hack into our hard drive and control the way that we think so that we can be used for their purposes. And in particular, what they have done is they have studied how Christians are awaiting the return of Jesus Christ. Now, not coincidentally, they have done the very same thing with the Islamic world. They have spent 1,400 years studying Islam, studying the Islamic mind, studying the Islamic psychology, in order so that they could know exactly where to attack the Islamic mind in such a way that the Muslim community would be used for their purposes. Now, with regards to this discussion, folks, in addition to many things that the Christians and the Muslims have in common with each other, one of the most important things is our reverence for Jesus Christ, and in particular how both peoples are waiting for the return of Jesus Christ. Now, this is where we're going to go with today's discussion. Now we know with the Christians how their mind has been hijacked by organized Jewish interests with regards to the return of Jesus Christ, because you can see this madness that has overtaken the Christian Zionist community, where they're waiting for the return of Jesus. And for them, it's the Jews having returned to Israel that's the sign that Jesus is coming back. And they use this, the organized Jewish interests use this in order to keep Christians locked in this mind prison where we have to support Israel, and if we do anything to frustrate the creation of Israel and the maintenance of Israel, then Jesus ain't coming back, folks. So we're going to talk today about what has happened in the Islamic world with the expected return of Jesus Christ, and how this is being used to foment and to create this clash of civilizations. I know I've been running my mouth here for a minute, but just let me go just another 30 seconds, Brother Nasheed. In particular, folks, we're going to bring into this discussion Iran, because it's obvious there is this absolute fury on the part of Israel and organized Jewish interests to deal with Iran. And by that, what we mean, of course, is to destroy Iran. And it all fits into this expected return of Jesus Christ. Now, before I get into that, I'm going to allow Nasheed and Saba to explain what the Islamic perspective is with the return of Jesus Christ towards the end times. Nasheed.
Well, before I explain the Islamic perspective, I want to just first comment on what you just mentioned. I think it was a very beautiful analogy you used with the liberties, the attack of the liberty, to show how our common enemies take the time to study what we believe and try to use that against us. And the other point that you made that is very, very clear, and also something the Qur'an support. The Qur'an says in verse 33 of Surah Al-Baqarah, it says, to the believing Christian, the believing Jew, the believing Sabian, any who believe in God and work righteousness will receive their reward with God. Now, I want to qualify only one of those categories. When we talk about the believing Jew, it's not talking about the Jews that we know today, the Zionists.
Right.
It's talking about those who believed in the pure, uncorrupted teachings of Moses.
Exactly.
I want to be very clear on that, because there are too many places in the Quran where it points out that strongest enmity to the Muslims would you find the Jews and the mushriks, the people who believe in many gods and so forth. So I want to make that very clear to start with. And regarding Islamic eschatology, eschatology is an area that not too many people are familiar with, especially amongst Muslim scholars. Many of them have dismissed eschatology. In fact, many of them have dismissed a lot of the hadiths that describe eschatology as not being valid. And part of that is because eschatology has to do with the end times. And it's like, if the prophet is predicting, or as the prophets predicted end times, he predicted certain situations that would happen. Now, if I'm living hundreds of years before those situations happen, then I wouldn't have any real relevant facts or relevant material to work with that will let me be inclined to believe what's happening. But as a result of what we see today happening in the world versus what the prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 1400 years ago, eschatology is extremely relevant. Extremely relevant. And many of the things that a man who was totally uneducated, the only trip he took was maybe trip to Damascus for business purposes, who we call an Ummi prophet, unlearned, he was able to say things back then in 1400 years ago that we see happening today. And I could list some of the signs, but I'm just going to list a few. One of the things he mentioned was that women will be dressed as men.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at today, you know, you see many women that wear the pants, they wear the shirt, the tie, and so forth. But he also mentioned that men will dress as women.
Mm-hmm.
But why would a woman dress like a man, and why would a man dress like a woman? It's because they want to attract
the
same
mm-hmm.
sex.
Mm-hmm.
So in his language, he was talking about the promotion of homosexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he predicted the great growth in homosexuality, and we see now today in the U.S. how homosexuality is legalized.
Not just legalized; it is enshrined. It's made a pillar of civilized society now.
Yes, and anyone who is against it is has a disease.
Right.
We have a homophobic disease.
Uh-huh.
We are not healthy human beings.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so he predicted that 1,400 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's many other signs. I'll give you one that's very relevant to what we deal with on the ugly truth. And it's in the Qur'an also. One of the major signs is that a beast, what we call Dabatul Ard, a beast of the earth, will speak to them from the Holy Land, speak to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
That beast that the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi predicted represents the unholy state of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
The beastly actions of this
Yes.
state is what the prophet was talking about in his predictions.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go on with many, many more predictions. But when we talk about Islamic eschatology, we talked about what are the things we will see at the end times.
Mm-hmm.
And as Mark so wonderfully pointed out, one of the major things that Muslims and Christians are both hoping for is the return of the Son of Mary,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, peace be upon him. So this is what we both see as a tremendous event that will be the final victory of good over evil.
Mm-hmm.
So we see this as the triumphant event that will take place in the end time to overcome the evils of our enemies.
What I'd like to point out here, Nasheed, is that when we talk about eschatology and what the prophet, peace be upon him, has predicted, and the fact that so much of this has come to pass, we have to keep in mind is that when we're talking about organized Jewish interests, they may or may not believe any of that anyway.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, they probably don't, because they are, many of them, if not most of them, are self-professed atheists. So they don't believe in God, and if they don't believe in God, they don't believe in prophets, and they don't believe in prophecies. It doesn't matter if they believe in it or not. It's that they know we believe in it. It's like if you want to go fishing, okay, and you know that and I know this for a fact because when I was young, my brothers and I would always go fishing every day. We'd always do that to get out of whatever work my dad had planned for us. We'd always go fishing, and my three brothers and I, of the four of us, there was one who was a really good fisherman, and he really understood fish. And he was the one, he had a box and he had all these different lures in it. He knew exactly what lure to use to catch what kind of fish. Now, it's the same thing with regards to our enemies. They see us as a particular type of fish that's going to bite at a certain type of worm, okay, or a certain type of lure. They don't want to eat that worm, okay, but they know what to use in order to get that hook set in our mouth. And so that's what we have to remember here, is that it's not that the Jews believe in the prophecies, but they know we believe in the prophecies, and that's why they manipulate this for their own ends. Saba, please say hello to the world out there, and let's hear what you have to say about this.
Thank you. Hello, world. Now, first of all, I wanted to comment on something you said in your introduction that's very important for everyone, for every Muslim and every Christian to remember, which is that you don't want, like all this, sorry, is not meant for Christian to become Muslim and Muslim to become Christian. And indeed, in what I like to call God's last testament, the Quran, we have many verses where God tells us that, you know, He has created us as different communities with different set of laws. And the Christians have their laws, the Muslims have their laws, and we will be judged on Judgment Day subject to those laws. Now, of course, if a Christian, you know, wants to become Muslim, you know, why not? But that is not what is like. That's not what the message of the Last Testament is all about. A Christian can and even should remain Christian. And you know, from an Islamic perspective, heaven is not reserved only to the followers of the last prophet. Heaven is for all the believers of God's prophets who do good deeds. They go together. That goes together. Belief, like faith, and righteousness. You can't just have faith. So that is very important to stress, that, you know, Islam does not mean to convert, like, you know, to convert by force, by the sword, by whatever means, like, you know, the Christians, the Jews, or any other nation. And also, just to develop further on this theme, is that, you know, when you hear our enemies always saying, oh, you know, the Muslim, they want to chop the heads of all the infidels, and they say that, you know, Muslims understand infidels as being Jews and Christians. Never.
No, that's not in the Quran.
Never. In the Quran, the Christians and the Jews are referred as Jews or Christians or Ahlul Kitab, people of the book. The ignorant are not even infidels. They are called ignorant. There is a specific term for it. The infidel is something else. But coming back to eschatology, now what Nasheed said is very true, and I will go even further actually, that you know, among all the signs that, you know, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has given us, and there are many, like men would be dressed like women, women will dress like men, women will be dressed and yet naked, like the rise of, you know, like the constriction, people competing in the construction of high buildings like skyscrapers, the proliferation of usury, like a world based on usury, etc. But out of all of the signs that Prophet Muhammad has, peace be upon him, has told us, the Quran has singled out two, only two. One of them is Gog and Magog, and the other one, and that is the most important one, it's the return of the Son of Mary, peace be upon them. And God says that his return is the sign. It's the mother of all signs.
Not a sign.
It's the
The
sign.
sign. Right.
It's the sign of the end times. End times doesn't mean the end of the world. It really doesn't mean that. It means the end of history, really, as Shaikh Imran Hosein nicely puts it. And so, yeah, the Quran singles out these two, making Jesus, the Son of Mary, peace be upon them, as at the center of Islamic eschatology. We cannot understand eschatology if we do not understand Jesus himself. And to understand him, we have to go back 2,000 years ago. Why did he come? Why did he come on earth? What was his mission, etc., etc. And what I have found, you know, in my studies and in my, like, you know, discussion with Muslim people, is this is something that is not known, and yet it's there in the Quran. Huh? It's not an interpretation. It's like in black and white. You don't need to interpret the verse. It's there, and a lot of people don't believe that. Not that they don't believe it, they don't know it, and the emphasis for some reason is put on Imam al-Mahdi rather than the Son of Mary. And yet, you know, obviously a prophet will be higher like, you know, if I can say use this expression, like would be higher in hierarchy than a human leader. And I've always wondered, why is it that the Muslims who, especially Arabic speaking Muslim, who profess to be Muslims, they claim to be Muslim, and they are practicing Muslim, they forget that part, that Jesus is at the center of eschatology, of Islamic eschatology.
Okay, let's just veer off the path here for just a moment, because you said something very important that the listeners need to understand better, which is this issue of the Mahdi, right?
Yeah.
Mahdi. So I assume that this is, I'm speaking obviously as an ill-informed or uninformed Christian on this, but the Mahdi is part of this eschatology, part of this prediction related to the return of Jesus. Let's talk a little bit about that. We're going to pull all this together, folks, in explaining Iran and all of the geopolitical things taking place right now related to this. Let's talk a little bit about the Mahdi. Am I saying that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, the Mahdi. Okay.
Mahdi.
Let's talk a little bit about that, Nasheed, if we could, and then anytime you want to chime in and add to that, Saba, please do.
Well, according to the teachings of Islam and the hadith of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet mentioned that a man will come from Medina, and he will head in Saudi Arabia, and he will head towards Mecca. And while he was going to Mecca, they will give him the bay'ah. The bay'ah, the people will want him to accept the bay'ah, I would say. The bay'ah is a terminology that means that this person will be a ruler, and he will accept the bay'ah at the Kaaba and declare himself to be the Mahdi. Upon that declaration, he will be attacked. The first attack that will come against the Mahdi will be an army from Shams. This is according to the hadith.
And
Shams is like Syria, the eastern part of Arabia, that whole area. And according to the hadith, it says this first army that will attack, they will be swallowed by a volcano.
Okay.
And this event of this army being swallowed by a volcano will be the signal that the world will recognize, or the world of the Muslims will recognize that the Mahdi has arrived.
Okay.
The next attack of the Mahdi will be by the Quraysh.
Okay, same people who attacked the Prophet.
The same people by the Quraysh.
Okay.
And that second attack, the forces of the Mahdi, the Muslims who will join the Mahdi, they will be able to defeat the Quraysh. And then the third attack will be in Damascus by the forces of the Dajjal, or the Antichrist. And that's where the Prophet, and this is so beautiful, the Prophet said that the Dajjal will attack the Mahdi with using a flying donkey, a donkey whose ears will be
It's just stretched out
wide,
and fly as fast as the clouds.
As fast as the clouds. Now, when you consider that, and I want to just digress just a little bit, when you consider that description from a man who never knew what an airplane looked like, 1,400 years ago, a donkey is a mode of transportation. It was a mode of transportation.
That's a mode of transportation, a mode of carrying a lot of weight.
Oh, carrying a lot of weight.
Right, yeah.
And this donkey will be a flying donkey. So that alone is very powerful in its analogy to describe the modern airplane today. You know, according to Shaikh Imran Hosein, he said a lot of the Wahhabi Salafi, they are looking for a physical flying donkey.
They are, yeah.
But he said that this is what we call religious symbology, symbolic language that has to be understood. So the Mahdi with the Muslims, the forces, and again I want to emphasize, the Mahdi will be the leader for Shia and Sunni Muslims. All those who support the Mahdi, they won't just be from one category alone. It will be both Shia and Sunni Muslims supporting the Mahdi. They will be attacked by the Antichrist Dajjal, and they will be cornered because they will come with their superior weaponry, superior armed forces. And just like the way Moses, alayhi salam, was cornered by Pharaoh, and where it was either the army of Pharaoh or the sea. And at that point, when the Mahdi is cornered, that's when the Son of Mary will descend, riding on two angels.
Meaning the Mahdi is about to be, it appears he's about to be destroyed.
Right.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
the forces have been arrayed against
Sure.
him, very similar to the way that the forces are being arrayed against, for
Exactly.
example, Syria or against Iran.
Sure.
And at that point, Jesus will.
Jesus will come. And keep in mind too, a literal interpretation of a lot of these metaphysical, I would say, allegorical representation is the wrong approach.
Right, and I was about to ask
See,
you about
because
that. Right.
a lot of these have symbolic meaning, but according to the Hadith, it's at that time that Jesus will arrive, peace be upon him, and he will be able to defeat the forces of the jinn.
Let me ask Nasheed a question here, because as soon as you were talking about how the Mahdi is going to come from Medina to Mecca, correct? Okay, what could possibly be the historical symbolism of these two places? Because the average person listening to this program is going to say, okay, what does Medina and Mecca have to do with Iran or Syria? So what possible spiritual symbolism could be attached to these two places that may have a deeper meaning than simply this thing on the surface of them being, Medina and Mecca?
That's a good question, then, and that's something I really haven't thought of in depth.
What does Medina mean to Islamic history?
In fact, that's what I'm going to try to connect it with. Islam, the teachings of Islam started in Mecca. And as a result of the persecution the Prophet ﷺ and his followers experienced in Mecca, they fled and migrated to Medina. Medina is where Islam prospered, is where the Prophet grew. And as a result of the Muslims growing, they were able to leave Medina and triumphantly return to Mecca.
So in other words,
triumphantly and to be successful in overcoming their major enemy, the Quraysh. Now, what I want to point out too, again, one of the things you mentioned is how does all this tie into the way the Jews, or I would say our enemies, use what they know about our eschatology against us, and especially with Iran. There's a deathly determination by Israel, a deathly determination by the West to get rid of the current government of Iran.
exactly.
Because the current government of Iran is very moderate. They are not extreme Shiites.
Not Shia enough.
Yeah. They don't feed into the divide and conquer methodology that's being used or being proposed by the West to the Muslim world. And they want to have it replaced by a government that's more compliant. Okay, that will be
one way or the other,
serving
either more reactionary and extreme, or more compliant in like the way that Saudi Arabia is.
Yes, exactly. Because when you look at, and that's a good point. When you look at Saudi Arabia, you look at Qatar, you look at the Emirates, Jordan, they are all aligned with the West, with America and Israel. So they are, I would say, tools being used to foster the purpose of world rule, which is what we know the Israelis want. So if the current government is toppled and a more Shia extremist government is put in place, then the civil war within Islam will be more inevitable. Okay? The civil war of those who are the Wahhabi extremists, the Shia, will be a clash between the two. And what better situation it is for our enemies that, let's say, Sabah is my enemy.
Absolutely.
You are my enemy. Hey, if I don't have to fight you and you fight each other,
Look, they have,
What better way it is? What better situation would there be for me than to have you
Yes, right.
destroy each other? So, this is what I see as the target.
You know, Nasheed just said, rightly so, that they want to have the Jews and Jewish control the Western government. They want to have a more compliant Iranian government, and they want something. They would like to have something in Iran, very much like they have in Arabia. Occupied Arabia, I should say, which, you know, all those Middle Eastern, actually not just Middle Eastern, North Africa is very much the same, where they claim to be Sunni, and for those Sunni nations, the #1 enemy is not Israel, it's Iran, it's Shia Islam. And they want the same with the Shia. They want a government that would claim that #1 enemy is no longer Israel, but Sunni Islam.
But you know what's interesting too is because you look at what they're doing with ISIS.
Yeah.
You know, we know who sponsored ISIS. We know whose purpose ISIS served. So these extremists that they in the mainstream media they're supposed to be against, but in reality they're the ones to support. And Russia proved that. When Russia attacked the ISIS in Syria, and they were gaining so many victories, that had the Western world worried. And I even heard McCain say point blank that they are killing our people. Okay, so they want this extremists. They want the extreme Sunni. They want the extreme Shia, so that these people can help fostering what the Jews want, what the Israelis want, in terms of having an easier way for world control.
You know, I would like to come back on the Mahdi, because it is central to what we were discussing, you know, before about Jesus himself. The Mahdi, the way I understand it, so he's like a normal human being.
Maybe like him.
And yes, because you are in Arabia, absolutely. You're not in Medina, though. You should move to Medina.
Not me.
And so he's a normal human being who, from Medina, as Nasheed said, from Medina will, at a time of political unrest in Arabia,
right?
there will be,
That's
it has to be like
point.
there's going to be political unrest
Yeah.
in Arabia. People will be fighting for power within Arabia, and he will, like, you know, flee almost from Medina to Mecca, doing the trip in reverse, doing the trip that Muhammad did in reverse. Muhammad went, alayhi salatu wasalam, went from Mecca to Medina. Imam al-Mahdi will do the opposite. And Imam al-Mahdi, the way I understand him, is that he will be the leader of resistance. That's like a military. He will be the leader of the resistance. He will, like, you know, attract all the dissidents, I guess, and unite and organize, I guess, you know, the resistance towards Wahhabism, towards sectarianism, towards, of course, you know, the enemy of mankind, the usual suspects, we know them, and we will know that, you know, he is the real guy, that he's not just like a charlatan like so many of them are. That's because when he is attacked, as Nasheed said, the earth, that's how I understood it. I could be wrong here, but I didn't understand that it would be a volcano, but that the earth would sink.
The earth would sink.
The earth would sink and swallow the army.
That's what. If I said volcano, that's wrong. It meant that it would be like an earthquake, where the earth would sink. Yes,
and
that's what I meant to say.
Sink and swallow an army that will come from the north, from Sham, to attack him, and that will be the sign that, okay, this guy is the real guy, he's the real deal.
And a good point you made too, which I omitted, which is that before the arrival of the Mahdi, a Khalifa will die, and the Khalifa represents a ruler, not the actual like the four caliphs in Islam, but a ruler would die, and there will be a struggle for power. You know, and Shaikh Imran Hosein has spoken about this on several occasions, And the thing he said is that when you look at the Saudi monarchy, so to speak,
The
you
entire
have a
political system, not just
system,
the person, but the
political
Yeah, yeah,
system.
yeah,
You have a lot of princes who will be vying for power. So his interpretation is that a leader in Saudi will die,
yeah.
and then you have a struggle for power amongst the princes in Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
and that struggle will lead to the Mahdi.
Okay, so backing up here just a moment, because I want to follow up on what you said here. I think this is extremely important. According to the prophecy, okay, and again, folks, I'm not saying yes or no that I believe in the prophecy. I'm approaching this from the standpoint of how our enemy views these things, and he says, okay, how can we capture the Islamic mind using these prophecies? And just as important, the potential problem that it poses to the Zionist agenda, that these prophecies exist, and then we have all of these things taking place today, that Muslims around the world, many of them very lukewarm in their faith, when they see these things starting to happen, how it will reawaken in them an understanding of things. And so we have, as Saba pointed out, that the Mahdi would be the leader of this resistance. Well, who is the uncontested leader of the resistance today, folks? It's Iran. Iran through Hezbollah, Iran through her revolution of 1979. You know, it's not Hamas, it's not Islamic Jihad. Iran, and I can tell you this having been there, folks, they are very organized. They're all reading from the same page. It's like an orchestra here, and all the musicians are very well trained, and they're on the same page. Their instruments are tuned all to the same pitch, and they are playing the proper piece of music here. And this is what has got Israel so worried, is because playing this music in the way that they are, they're starting to attract the interest of Muslims in the Middle East, who up until this point have been kept confused and disoriented, okay? And so this is what has got Israel so afraid of, I think, is that Iran is going to be able to put forth a believable narrative that all of these prophecies are coming to pass, and that the Mahdi, whether it is a real person, a singular person, or whether it's a country or a system, that is the nucleus around which the entire Islamic world is going to gravitate in organizing itself against organized Zionist interests.
Well, you see, this is where I wanted to go earlier, because, you know, I was saying at the beginning that Sunni Muslim, for some reason, they do not see that the return of Jesus is the most important element in Islamic eschatology, and it is he is the person that we are waiting for. Sunni Muslim are for some reason really focusing on the Mahdi. However, the Shia Muslim also have a Imam Mahdi eschatological figure, but for Shia it's the return of the Mahdi. For the Sunni, there is no return. He has never come yet. He is going to emerge, and whereas for the Shia, he disappeared. You know, that's the 12th
Right.
Imam, one who
Right.
disappeared.
He was
and,
there, but then he
yeah,
disappeared.
and so they are waiting for this Mahdi to return. And I think, I could be wrong here, but I think that, you know, the Wahhabi founded mosques all over the Sunni world are deliberately stressing on the Mahdi rather than on Jesus, the son of Mary, peace be upon them, only to stress the differences between Sunni and Shia.
Not only that, but the Wahhabists, if they haven't done it yet, they probably will do this. They will introduce their own Wahhabist Mahdi as a possible fulfillment.
Well, let me just tell you what the Prophet
The
says.
Shia could do that, actually,
Yeah.
or the
The
Zionists
Prophet-
could do that.
The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that what's going to happen in the end time is that a false Messiah will rise up in Israel. Okay? the Antichrist, as you call it in Christian eschatology. But this false Messiah will declare himself as to be the Messiah, and he'll fool a large part of the world. And although I agree with you, Mark, when you say that Iran is the leader of the resistance, but I don't think we could equate Iran as being the Mahdi. And the reason for that, there's several reasons for that. One of the major reasons for that is that, according to Islamic eschatology, the Dajjal will be victorious over the Muslims. Not over the Muslims, but in term, when I say victorious in gaining control over the world.
As he has now.
Well, they rule the world by proxy now, but they want to be able to rule the world literally. And all of this is going to happen after the Muhammad Armageddon.
Right.
Where the big war will take place. The big war hasn't taken place yet. And this is again according to Islamic eschatology. Once this big Muhammad takes place, then the population of the world will be so decimated that it'll be easier for Israel to rule the world. And that's when the Mahdi will come, after the big war. Okay? And so in terms of the sequence in which it's going to happen, that's the way that's the way the prophecy.
Well, my point is that the strategists in Israel and in Tel Aviv and Washington D.C. and other places, they're looking at all of this, and they know how the Muslim mind works and what the Muslims are expecting. And so they're looking at this no different than playing chess, and they see a move that their opponent may be able to make that will be disastrous for them. So they're looking at this, and they know the Iranians are intelligent. They know how to. The chess was invented by the Iranians. Okay. So this business, this prophecy with the Mahdi, the Israelis are looking at this and they're saying, well, the Iranians could, if they wanted to, they could begin advancing the narrative that the fulfillment of this prophecy is approaching, and the evidence of this is Iran's 1979 revolution. Okay. Now this, the Muslim world is oppressed. Okay, it's a sleeping giant. Unfortunately, as you have explained to me, the Muslims don't really know their faith. They don't live their faith the way that they could or should, no different than the Christian world. But something like this would be a way of animating them in such a way to bring about, first of all, to bring an end to this rift between Sunni and Shia, and also, too, as a way of unifying the Islamic world, particularly in the Middle East, against the West and against Israel. And this is where I want to go with this discussion, and why they are absolutely intent upon, crashing through those protective walls around Iran and getting in there before they can begin introducing this narrative to the Islamic world.
Like I said earlier, they're hell-bent on dethroning the current regime in Iran. They want to change it to a more compliant regime. And what you're saying also in terms of the eschatology of Islam and how they're using that, I think Islam already predicted how they're going to try to use it, in the sense that Islam already predicted that a false Messiah will rise up in Israel and declare himself to be the Messiah. All those Muslims who are fooled by the propaganda of our enemies, the propaganda that is meant to not let them see who the real Messiah is, they will follow that false Messiah. So when you look at today, you look at countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Dubai Emirates, their alliance with America, their alliance with Israel, and even statements by some of their leaders showing solidarity with Israel. They want Iran to be like that. They want Iran to not have the kind of leadership it has today, so that they can join Qatar, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. And so when that false Messiah stands up in Israel, they too will give alliance to this false Messiah. So they are working hard to try to dethrone this current government, as I said earlier. But it's to make them part of the Muslim world, so-called Muslim world, that will have acknowledgement and alliance with this false Messiah.
And which will hate each other more than against, Israel and the Antichrist, etc. And again, I could be wrong here, but it's from what I gathered, from my reading and listening to Shaikh Imran as well, is the Sunni Shia civil war has at least two purposes. One is to decimate the Muslims from the region, for one, and second, and perhaps it is the most important, that if a Sunni Shia civil war starts, it's going to go to Pakistan, because there's a huge Shia population in Pakistan. It's not Sunni, it's not like all Sunni. And if civil war starts in Pakistan, Pakistan is the only Muslim country which has nuclear weapons. And their goal has always been to denuclearize Pakistan. They cannot rule the world if one Muslim country still has nuclear power weapons. They can't, and so Pakistan is always in the crosshair, and Pakistan's nuclear plants are always in their crosshair, and that's why they will not give up this, they will not give up trying to get a Sunni Shia civil war, and we see it now. I see it from the Sunni world, where I hear, whether in Europe or in my travel, like in the Middle East or in Africa, where they all know Israel is the enemy. They all know that. But the prime enemy is Iran. It's always
let me just say this. Now, I know for a fact that this whole business with Islamic eschatology has them very worried about, how it can be used in, as I said, in breaking down the divisions between Shia and Sunni, because I have read many, many articles coming out of what we would call, the neocon establishment in the United States, the Daniel Pipes people and the Martin Kramers and, all these people who are, working feverishly to get this clash of civilizations, not to get it going because it's already going, but really to bring it to this temperature where it cannot be extinguished, okay? And they have written many articles that I've seen talking about the return of the Mahdi and how the Iranians, they're pushing this. I know for a fact that President Ahmadinejad, and by the way, folks, if I didn't mention it earlier in the program, I had the extreme pleasure and honor on this trip of being with the president, of shaking his hand, and it's just giving me goosebumps right now. But anyway, years and years ago, folks, I put on a conference in Los Angeles, helped put a conference together, and dedicated around No More Wars for Israel, and I, through my secret channels into Iran, because everybody knows I'm a secret agent, I contacted then President Ahmadinejad and asked if he would put together a video presentation that we could play at the conference. And in the video presentation, he starts off talking about how we all look for the return of the Mahdi. Okay, so going back to what I was saying about the neocon establishment trying to get this thing going, they have referenced this, how Iran, that they are pushing the return of the Mahdi, and how this is a sign that things are, really bad in Iran, and we got to get in there and we got to overthrow that regime and all the rest of that. So it's obvious that they are very nervous about this particular piece on the chessboard, and why that piece has got to be either seized or in some way rendered immobile in the game, lest the pro Zionist community lose control of the game.
Mm-hmm. I think that the return of the Mahdi signals the end.
The return or the arrival?
I'm sorry, the arrival.
Okay.
The arrival of the Mahdi signals the beginning of the end for Israel and for the forces that align themselves with Israel. So if they realize that Muslims all are in sync with this,
right?
Okay, that once the Mahdi arrives, that they will then be united to fight or struggle against our common enemy. That will have Israel very worried. I mean, put yourself in Israeli's shoes. You know, you would be worried too when somebody else believed that this sign or this event, when this event takes place, billions of people believe that this is the time for your destruction.
Let me just go on that. You know, the thing that you told me earlier about Islamic eschatology, about the prediction by the Prophet, peace be upon him, about these flying donkeys with these giant flapping ears, okay? If it can be explained to the Islamic community worldwide that was symbolic.
Religious symbolism.
Symbolism of airplanes.
Yes.
Therefore, possibly the description of the Mahdi, whether it's the return of the Mahdi that the Shia are expecting, or the arrival of the Mahdi that the Sunnis are expecting, if the argument can be made that it's not necessarily a man, but rather a country or a system, imagine what that would do to the, especially the Sunni Islamic world. If they were to be made to see, instead of looking for a man, it's actually the revolution of 1979.
From a Sunni perspective, it is a man. We have his name.
Okay.
We already have his name. We know his name. We know what he will look like.
Okay.
He has been described to us. Now,
what if the narrative, though, could be done on the part of Iran? Yes, it is a man that is coming, but he's going to come. He's going to be
and he will be an Arab. He will be an Arab.
Well, there are Arabs in Iran.
Yeah.
There are Arabs in
Well,
Iran.
the thing is, the best person on eschatology, that best scholar on eschatology, is Shaikh Imran Hosein. May Allah continue to bless him.
Absolutely.
And I think he can speak better on this, but he always described the return of the Mahdi, the return of Jesus, peace be upon him, as a human being, not a system. Now, that's his description.
Okay.
But another scholar...
And understand, Nasheed, I'm not saying that the Mahdi won't be a man.
Yeah,
but I'm saying that the Iranians could begin to tickle the mind, the collective mind of the Islamic world.
Yeah, I
with the
understand.
notion that the Mahdi is going to come out of Iran because of what we have achieved. Look how God is protecting our revolution. It's protecting our society. You know.
Yes, I understand. And again, like I said, the Shaikh Imran Hosein is the best in terms of eschatology. But I can tell you this: there's been other Islamic scholars who explained Jesus, peace be upon him, not in terms of a human being. They refer to how the Qur'an referred to Jesus as a kalimatan. A kalimatan is an Arabic word that means word, that Jesus is a word of Allah. What made Jesus powerful, what made Jesus effective was not his flesh, but the message that he brought, was the consciousness that he brought to the world. And that consciousness being returned again amongst the people. This is the way some scholars, approach this. Is like that word, that kalimatan, that's being brought back into existence for human beings to adopt or be part of, whether they're Muslims, Christians, or whatever. That same consciousness will overthrow the evil and the oppression that's in the world. You know,
I was saying earlier that, when Imam al-Mahdi emerges from in Arabia, that he will be attacked, and that an army from the north will come in to attack him, and that army will, the earth, will sink and will swallow that army. And that is the sign that he is the real Imam al-Mahdi. Now in Iran, the Shia, they are not waiting for the arrival of the Mahdi, but for the return, as I said earlier. And I, like Shaikh Imran Hosein, said a few times, and I totally agree with him on this one, is that our enemies who have been studying, Sunni eschatology, Shia eschatology, Orthodox eschatology, they know where the differences are between Sunni and Shia, and I would not be surprised if they are actually grooming already a Shia Imam al-Mahdi that will fool most of the Shia. From the Sunni perspective, there is this sinking of the earth that will be the test to know whether the claim of this man that he's the Imam al-Mahdi is true or not. I don't know. I don't think the Shia. I don't know if the Shia have something that can validate the claim of truth to their return of their Imam. But one thing very, very interesting, I think, that we have in the hadith of the end time is that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he kind of already told us that something will happen with Iran, that they will be probably fooled when he tells us that when the Antichrist comes comes into the world as a human being, as a Jew, he will be followed by, I think it's 70,000 Jews from Isfahan.
Oh,
yeah.
From Iran.
They
will recognize him, and they will follow. They will be part of
part of the Shah. And again, the Sheikh Imran Hosein has interpreted that to mean that no way is that possible with the current regime. He said that's part of why they want to overthrow this current regime.
That's right, yeah.
That part it will be fulfilled when they achieve that. But one thing I want to make a clear distinction of, because I want to be sure that when we talk in generalities, I don't want everyone to think that it's all the people in a particular country or whatever. Even though Saudi Arabia is compliant with the West, even in the return of the Mahdi, there will be people in Saudi Arabia joining the Mahdi.
Yes,
right, to fight against evil. And there are a lot of good people in Saudi, even in Qatar. I remember I took a flight, and I don't want to digress. I took a flight from Dubai to Qatar, and I was sitting next to a Qatari. And I was just totally impressed that this person he grew up all his life in Qatar, but yet he was very aware, and he was against the position of his government. So there's a lot of good people in a lot of these countries that whose position are pro-Israel or pro-West, that are more, I would say, against what their government stands for. But I think the best way to understand eschatology, and as the Shaikh Imran says a lot at times, is that we cannot understand the Quran if we take a verse in isolation.
Right. That's right, yeah.
We have to look at the whole picture. And understanding the whole picture of what Islam says about eschatology, it will allow us to understand in full scope of what's going to happen. Because we didn't even touch on Khorasan at all, and other things that we can discuss. But I think all those things will help with the understanding. And I'm just a student myself.
Yes,
I defer to Shaikh Imran Hosein, and if I can help to arrange to have him come on your show to talk more in depth, but I can only share with you what I have learned or what I understand, which may not be the best sometimes, but inshallah, we try to present our best. But what I present is what I understand, which could need some improvement as well.
Same here. And you said earlier, Mark, that our enemy has been studying us for thousands of years, etc., etc. There's one thing that our enemy they also have, our enemy also have their own eschatology. However, they have a different approach to ours, which is that from a Christian or Islamic, I should say, Islamic eschatological point of view, is that these are a point of history, a sequence of history that will happen. and can't change them. That is how it will happen. In Jewish, the Jews also have their eschatology, but they say that you can actually change the course of events. Like they already have a roadmap. It's like telling you, okay, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And of course, they are always the victims in that in that picture, but they can change it. They can change it, and I think the reason why they are studying our Islamic eschatology is because they have their own Jewish mindset where they say, okay, in their eschatology it says this and that, so we're going to do everything to change it. And like, for example, as we are about cross and crescent solidarity, in Jewish eschatology, they also speak about a Russian Islamic alliance at the end time.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Jews do.
No.
The
Jews do.
The Jews do. Yeah. The Jews do. They are Russian. They call it. Well, for them, they say it's Magog, and they identify Magog as Russia.
Yeah.
And they have always identified Magog as Russia. And they.
Now, where is this found? Is this in the Old Testament?
It's not in the Old Testament. It's in you'll find it in the Talmud and commentary on eschatological.
They talk about a Russian
alliance with the Muslim against Israel.
Wow.
Well, that's the same.
That's their.
What's interesting too is that when the Sheikh went to Moscow and met with the Orthodox religious scholars.
Yeah, and Professor Dugin as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
The closeness of Islamic eschatology with what the Orthodox Christians understand as eschatology was amazing. There was so much closeness, especially the conquest of Constantinople and so forth. Now, I find it very interesting what Sabah just shared about the Jews believe that the Muslims will have an alliance with Russia.
Yeah.
Now, in the Quran, it talks about how the Muslims will align with Rome. Rome at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was in Constantinople.
Right. That was the Roman Empire.
That was the Roman Empire.
It was the Eastern Roman Empire.
But then the Romans moved from Constantinople to Russia. I'm sorry.
The Orthodox Church.
The Orthodox Church.
The
Orthodox Church moved from Constantinople to Russia.
Yeah.
So the Constantinople of today is not
in Constantinople.
It's actually
It's
Russia.
Moscow. Yeah, it is.
And the Sheikh has made, so many speeches, where he talks about this alliance with Rome being an alliance that Muslims will have with
That's
Russia.
right.
On that note, I would just like to remind both of you, in the unlikely event that you were not aware of it, but about 3 years ago, Putin gave a speech where he said, and it escaped the notice of a lot of people, but it didn't escape my notice. He gave a speech, and I don't remember what the forum was where he was saying this, but he said that Islam is closer religiously and culturally to Orthodox Christianity than it is to Western Christianity.
Yeah.
Now, most people read that and they say, oh, big deal, he's just being nice to the Muslims there. But what it reflects is that the Russians understand that they have a common, that there's an alliance that needs to be formed between the Orthodox centered in Russia and the Islamic world in defeating this Dajjal system.
Yes,
absolutely.
But that goes really, it's in agreement with what the Quran says in Surah Al-Ma'idah. It says, strongest in love and affection to you will you find those Christians.
Those who say they are Christian.
Those who say they are Christians because they honor the monastery, the
monastic.
They have priests and monks among them, and they are not proud.
They're not proud, So it's amazing to see when you look at the Islamic world, the ones who are aligning with the forces of Dajjal, Saudi Arabia, the government of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and so forth. But the ones who are aligning with Russia is Iran.
That's right. Iran, Syria,
and Syria.
Absolutely.
Syria. So, in terms of who is really following the Quran and really following the Islamic, it's Syria.
It's the Shia world.
And the Shia world. So it's really, you know, very interesting to see that.
No, absolutely. And you know, just to clarify a bit further, you know, when in the Quran, sorry, when the Prophet says, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says that we will make an alliance with, that the Muslims will make an alliance with Rome. A lot of Arab or Arabic speaking people or Muslim people understand Rome as in Rome, Italy. The thing is that something that most people don't know very well is that, you know, the Roman Empire was divided in two, Western Empire, Eastern Empire. The Western one was defeated by the barbaric tribes in the 5th century. The Eastern one prospered until the Ottoman conquest.
For 1,000 years.
And the Eastern one is known now as Byzantium, or the Byzantine Empire, but they themselves, until the end, called themselves Roman. They were Romans, and they were known to all the neighbors, whether the Persian, the Arabs, all the neighbors knew them as Romans, not Persian, not Byzantines or anything. And so yeah, that's just wanted to clarify this.
Well, folks, unfortunately, we have run into this huge wall here, known as a scheduled flight, on the part of Nasheed and his lovely wife Akanke. She has just given us the thumbs down that we have to bring this very productive and fascinating discussion to a screeching halt. But rest assured, folks, this will continue. You know, as Napoleon said, I shall return. We shall return, folks, to continue on with this discussion, because I can guarantee you, nowhere on the planet will you hear a discussion of this type that you have just heard here today. I want to give not just my personal thanks, but my personal undying affection to all of my friends here, who have come all the way from wherever, you know, they have come from, with all of the impediments and aggravation involved, coming here just to see little old me, folks, here in Lebanon. And of course, all of you out there who have helped support what we do here with your prayers and your assistance. We thank you. We're going to win this one, folks, as our good friend Mike Piper always liked saying, you know, we're going to win this one. And those who have worked against us, as Mike used to say, can take a running leap straight into hell. So anyway, folks, that's it for today. Again, I'm glad to be with you, glad to be with my beautiful brother and my sisters here. And Nasheed's giving me the indicator that he wants to say something.
Mark said, "I will be back," but I like to use the words of determined. He didn't say "I will be back." He said, "I should return."
Shall return.
But I want to use the words of